The first snowfall in Maple Ridge always brought with it a sense of magic, a quiet beauty that hushed the world and invited forgotten memories to stir. On a chilly December morning, as soft flakes blanketed the town square, Eliana Harper tugged her coat tighter around her frame and stepped inside the cozy warmth of Mason's Books and Brews, the only bookstore cafe in town she hadn't planned on coming back. Not after 6 years away. But when her grandmother's health took a turn, Eliana found herself trading New York's chaos for the quiet corners of her childhood. She was only supposed to stay a month, just long enough to help, just long enough to leave without getting too attached again. The little bell above the door chimed as she entered, brushing snow from her coat sleeves. The scent of roasted coffee beans and old paper instantly wrapped around her like a blanket of familiarity. "Mason, you've outdone yourself again," she whispered to no one in particular. She wandered to the back corner, where new poetry volumes used to be displayed when a voice stopped her. "You're standing in my favorite spot." Eliana turned around, startled. A man late 20s, tall with kind brown eyes and a soft smile, stood by the shelf, holding a cup of coffee and a worn notebook. His knit scarf matched the gentle tones of his voice. "I used to live in this spot," she replied, smiling despite herself. "Didn't realize I had competition." He laughed softly. "Then I guess we'll have to share." Something about his presence felt calming familiar in a way that made her chest ache, though she couldn't place why. "I'm Eliana," she said, offering a hand. The man froze for a moment, blinking. A strange flicker passed through his gaze. Recognition? "I know," he finally said. "I'm Noah Bennett." The name clicked and her heart stuttered. Of course, Noah. He used to live next door. The quiet boy with the messy sketchbooks who once helped her fix a flat tire during a thunderstorm. The boy who watched her leave Maple Ridge without saying goodbye. "Noah," she murmured, "you've changed." His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Not enough, apparently. You forgot me." "No," she said quickly, her voice quieter. "I didn't forget. I just left a lot behind." Noah gestured to the two armchairs by the corner fireplace. "Want to sit?" She hesitated, but something in her chest pulled her forward. She sat across from him, steam rising between their mugs. "I waited for you," he said after a beat, like the words had been trapped inside for too long. "You said you'd write. You never did." Guilt crept in like cold air under a door. "I was scared if I looked back, I wouldn't move forward." He nodded slowly. "And now?" Eliana glanced at the window where snow gently danced through the sky. "Now, I'm not sure if moving forward means coming back." They sat in silence. For a moment, two hearts holding history between them. "I'm glad you're here," he said softly. "Even if it's just for a little while." And just like that, a chapter that had never properly closed began to unfold again, word by hesitant word, glance by softened glance. Little did Eliana know, Noah hadn't just waited 6 years. He'd waited through seasons, through quiet holidays, through every birthday she didn't call. And now that she was here, back in the heart of the town that never forgot her, he wasn't about to let her fade again. Not this time. Eliana Harper hadn't intended to stay longer than 4 weeks. Her flight back to New York was already scheduled. But as she stood on the wraparound porch of her grandmother's cottage the next morning, cradling a mug of tea in mittened hands, Maple Ridge felt far too peaceful to leave so soon. Inside, the familiar creaks of the wooden floor and the scent of lavender from her grandmother's diffuser wrapped her in a strange sense of homecoming. She hadn't realized how much she missed silence that wasn't filled with car horns, or nights where the only glow came from stars. Not screens. Her grandmother, May Harper, had been the rock of the family for as long as Eliana could remember, always. Offering tea for heartbreak, laughter for disappointment, and a porch swing when the world felt too heavy. How did it feel? May asked that morning with a knowing twinkle in her eyes. Eliana turned, confused. How did it feel? Running into Noah Bennett? Eliana blinked. How did you? This town talks, sweetheart. Especially when two childhood friends reunite under bookstore chandeliers. Eliana chuckled, but her stomach tightened. It was unexpected, but not unwelcome. May raised an eyebrow. Eliana sighed. He waited, Grandma. All these years, and I didn't even write back. May gently patted her hand. Sometimes the heart remembers what the mind tries to bury. Meanwhile, just 2 blocks away, Noah stood in his modest art studio above the cafe. Paintings lined the walls, some unfinished, others vivid and alive with emotion. But there was one he never moved. A canvas of a girl in a yellow sundress standing in a sunflower field, her hair catching the wind. Eliana, as he remembered her, he had painted it the summer after she left, when everything still smelled like her. Laughter and the world felt emptier than it should have done. Noah had stayed in Maple Ridge for reasons people never questioned. He inherited his father's carpentry shop and ran it with quiet dedication. But his real love was illustrating children's book stories of hope and home and second chances. His modest success allowed him a life of peace, though not without. A gnawing ache he never quite named out loud. He often spent mornings sketching near the riverbank or helping Miss Bonnie arrange her flower shop displays. At 29, he wasn't the boy who once tripped over his own feet around Eliana, but he was still the man who hadn't let go of what she meant to him. That weekend, the town hosted its annual Winter Lantern Festival. Maple Ridge lit up. In warm yellows and oranges, lanterns bobbing like stars come to earth. Children ran between booths with cocoa-stained mittens, and laughter echoed down the narrow streets. Eliana walked beside her grandmother, scarf worn high, cheeks pink from the cold. Her eyes lit up with each memory triggered by familiar faces and places. Noah's running the firewood booth again, May murmured as they passed, and there he was stacking bundles with a gentle rhythm. Beanie slightly askew, cheeks red from wind. Eliana hesitated, then walked up with a shy smile. You still do this? Noah turned, smiling. Tradition. You love this town? She said, watching him. He glanced around. It's where my roots are. Even if the branches once reached for something, or someone who left, the words stung gently. She deserved that. I thought I needed to chase big dreams to find myself, Eliana said quietly. But maybe. I left a piece of myself here I shouldn't have. They stood under a string of golden lights, neither speaking, yet their silence wasn't hollow. Later that night, Eliana sat on her childhood bed, tracing her fingers along the edge of a photo tucked in her journal, her and Noah at 16. Faces flushed with laughter at the summer fair. It had been years since she looked at it. Back then, Noah had been quiet but steady. Her world had been loud and full of ambition, and she hadn't had the patience for someone who was simply there. But now she saw the weight of there, a constancy, the loyalty, the kind of love that waits without demanding. Noah spent the evening sketching under dim lamplight, replaying her voice in his mind. She seemed different, more grounded, more real, and yet so much of her was the same. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking, the sparkle in her eyes when something made her laugh. He didn't know why she was really back or how long she'd stay. But one thing was clear. He wasn't the boy who had stood quietly by, watching her leave. He was the man who would risk being hurt again if it meant even one more real conversation, and maybe, just maybe, this time, he wouldn't have to wait alone. Scene transition, 2 hearts, once separated by years and choices, now stood just a few steps apart. In a town where the snow softened every edge and the lanterns told stories of hope, a new story was beginning to form, one built not on grand gestures or sweeping declarations, but on presence, patience, and the slow rediscovery of a love that had quietly survived the silence. The days in Maple Ridge moved slower now, draped in soft winter hushes and golden morning light. For Eliana, what began as a temporary stay gradually turned into a daily rhythm she didn't want to rush. And the unexpected heartbeat of that rhythm? Noah Bennett thought it began with simple moments, bumping into him at the bakery, exchanging knowing, smiles during town errands, small talk that never felt small. But something deeper stirred beneath the surface. Something both of them had felt before, but were only now beginning to name. One afternoon, Eliana found herself walking past Mason's. Books and burrs again, drawn in not by the scent of coffee, but by the faint sound of piano. Inside, she followed the soft melody to the back, where Noah sat on the old upright by the reading corner, fingers gently coaxing a tune from memory. "You play?" she asked, surprised. He looked up, slightly sheepish. "Only when no one's listening." "I'm not no one," she teased, taking a seat beside him on the bench. "Keep playing." He hesitated, then resumed the soft tune. Eliana watched his profile, the concentration, the curve of his lips, the way his shoulders relaxed into the notes. "You always surprise me," she said quietly. He smiled without looking at her. "You always saw me as the boy next door." "I guess I wanted to be more." Silence stretched comfortable, then charged. She spoke softer this time. "You already were." That evening, he invited her to join him at the annual Christmas tree lighting ceremony in the town square. She agreed without hesitation. Snow fell in slow flakes as townspeople gathered under twinkling lights and cinnamon-scented air. Children ran in circles while couples huddled close, hot cider in hand. Noah handed Eliana a cup. Their fingers brushed and she didn't pull away. "Used to watch you at this every year," he said. "Even after you left, I kept hoping ... Maybe one day you come back." Eliana's breath caught, and I did. He nodded, gaze steady. "But will you stay?" It wasn't a demand. It wasn't even a question she could answer yet. But it planted a seed in her heart that she couldn't ignore. Over the next few days, they spent more time together. He took her to the frozen lake where they used to skate as kids. They spent hours talking about childhood memories, about how the world looked different now, about things they'd never shared before. One night, as they stood beside the frozen water, Noah handed her an old photo. "I found this tucked in one of my sketchbooks," he said. "You drew this when we were 16. Said it was how you saw the world, with light in unexpected places." Eliana took the drawing, stunned. "I forgot about this." "I didn't," he replied gently. "I never forgot anything you gave me." The quiet between them was electric. "You've always been steady," she whispered. "I think I used to mistake that for stillness." "But it's strength, isn't it?" He nodded once. "Only for the things worth waiting for." On Christmas Eve, the town hosted a lantern walk through the woods. Everyone carried paper lanterns down the trail, lighting up the forest with gentle glows and shared warmth. Eliana and Noah walked side by side, their lanterns swinging in rhythm. At one point, the trail opened to a clearing dusted with snow. Lanterns surrounded the edges like stars fallen from the sky. Eliana gasped at the beauty of it. "I used to come here when I missed you," Noah said quietly, voice husky with vulnerability. "I'd sit right there," he pointed to a bench, "and wonder what you'd be like now." "And?" she asked, her voice barely audible. He turned to her. "You're everything I remembered, and somehow more." She looked into his eyes, searching, hesitating. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Me, too," he whispered. "But I'd rather be scared standing next to you than safe standing alone." The moment hung between them, not quite a kiss, but the kind of closeness that pulsed with quiet longing. Breath mingled, hearts thudded. But they both knew, when the kiss did happen, it would mean something, everything. The next day, he surprised. Her by showing up at her grandmother's cottage with a bouquet knot of roses. But wildflowers, even in winter, you always hated cliches, he grinned. So I figured I'd bring you something real. Eliana laughed, touched beyond words. You remembered that? I remember everything about you, he said. Even the things you've forgotten about yourself. They spent the afternoon decorating cookies with her grandmother, laughter filling the kitchen. At one point, Eliana caught Noah gazing. At her, not with desire, but with awe. She realized then, he wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't trying to win her back. He simply saw her. In every way. Even the parts of her she thought had been dulled by time and distance. And that realization sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the fireplace. Later that evening, as they sat alone on the porch, wrapped in wool blankets and sipping cocoa, Eliana finally spoke the thought that had been growing quietly inside her. You waited, she said softly, eyes locked with his. And I think I'm ready to stop running. Noah reached over and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Then stay, he murmured, just stay. And though no promise had yet been made, and no declaration yet spoken, something had shifted. The space between them was no longer filled with what was. It pulsed now with what could be. A slow, beautiful beginning, seen transition. Two hearts once marked by silence now beat louder in shared moments. The air between them crackled not with uncertainty, but with possibility. And with every glance, every quiet confession, every hand grazed and soul stirred, they were writing a new story, one where love wasn't rushed, but remembered. And then, rediscovered Dot in the days that followed Christmas, Maple Ridge seemed to exhale into a peaceful lull, its snow-draped streets and twinkling lights preserving the magic of the holidays just a little longer. And within that lull, Eliana and Noah quietly fell deeper into something neither of them had dared name aloud. Dot. It wasn't sudden. This unfolding between them, it was slow and careful, like a fire built piece by piece, not with sparks, but with warmth that never once threatened to burn out. Eliana found herself looking for Noah in small moments. A knock at the door around noon meant he brought her soup from Marlowe's diner. A simple text, "Meet me by the bridge," meant he knew when she needed a break from caretaking. Their shared rhythm had become a soft dance of knowing glances, thoughtful gestures, and laughter that came easy now. One day, as they walked through the woods with mugs of cinnamon coffee in hand, Eliana paused by the frozen creek, her breath rising in pale clouds. "This is where I used to sit with my sketch pad when the world felt like too much," she said, crouching down to brush a layer of snow from a fallen log. "I forgot this place even existed." Noah stood beside her, quiet for a long moment. "You were always running towards something bigger. Even when you were here, you weren't really here." She looked up at him, no defensiveness in her eyes. Only honesty. I was afraid I'd get stuck, that I'd never grow. And now? He asked gently. She looked around, the trees, the sky, his steady presence. "Now I'm afraid I've missed something beautiful while I was chasing something shiny." Noah reached down and helped her up. His hand lingered in hers. "You didn't miss it. You just paused it. And I'm still here. If you want to press play." Later that week, they took a drive through the snowy backroads, music low, windows slightly cracked to let in the crisp air. Eliana rested her head against the passenger window, eyes closed, while Noah kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other lightly brushing hers between the seats. "You used to hum when you were thinking," he said. Her eyes fluttered open. "I did. Yeah," he smiled. "Usually when you were sketching or trying to solve something you cared about." Eliana laughed softly. "You remember everything?" "I watched you like someone watches a masterpiece," he admitted. "Even before I knew what it meant to love someone." Her breath caught, the weight of his words pressing gently against her chest. Noah, I'm not saying it to pressure you, he continued, eyes still on the road. I just need you to know this isn't casual for me. It never was. Tears threatened behind her eyes, not from sadness, but from the purity of it all. She wasn't used to love like this, love that didn't demand, love that waited, love that stayed. That night, he invited her to his art studio. It was warm and smelled faintly of cedar and paint. Canvases lined the walls, some vibrant, some soft, all breathtaking. In one corner, a half-finished painting stood on the easel. A girl with wind-blown hair, standing on a shoreline. It's you, Eliana whispered, stepping closer. Why the ocean? Because you always felt like one, Noah said, voice low. Beautiful, powerful, but also just out of reach. She turned toward him. And now, you're here, he said simply. And I'm terrified I'll wake up and find out it was a dream. She stepped closer, her fingertips brushing his. It's not a dream, Noah. Their hands found each other, and this time they didn't let go. Over the next few days, their moments became more intimate, yet still rooted in sweetness and trust. They shared a candlelit dinner at her grandmother's on New Year's Eve, slow dancing in the living room to old jazz as the clock neared midnight. Noah rested his forehead against hers. I've waited 6 years to do this. You could have moved on, she said, eyes locked with his. I didn't want to. And at midnight, under the soft flicker of candlelight and the crackling fireplace, he kissed her, slow, tender, certain that it wasn't a kiss to prove anything. It was a kiss that whispered, I'm here. I've always been here. One snowy afternoon, Eliana found a sketch Noah had left on her porch. It was a simple drawing, two hands holding each other under a tree whose branches intertwined at the top. On the back, he'd written, Home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's a person. She clutched the drawing to her chest, heart full and aching at the same time. Because now, the only thing scarier than staying. That was leaving. In early January, as Maple Ridge began to thaw under hesitant sunrises, Eliana invited Noah to her grandmother's attic. I want to show you something, she said. They climbed the creaky stairs together, and Eliana pulled open a dusty trunk. These are my old sketchbooks, she said. I haven't opened them in years. They sat together, flipping through. The pages, some full of joy, others haunted by teenage restlessness. At one page, Eliana stopped. A simple charcoal drawing of Noah from behind, sitting on the riverbank. I drew this the day I left, she whispered. I didn't tell anyone, but I watched you from the bridge. You sat there for an hour, like you knew I was already gone. Noah didn't speak. He reached out, lacing his fingers with hers. I think I was always supposed to come back to you, she said. You did, he said, and I'm not letting go this time. The space between them had dissolved, no longer filled with hesitation or regret. It now overflowed with shared dreams and unspoken promises. Love, in its truest form, had taken root not in grand declarations, but in quiet truths and days filled with meaning. They were no longer just reconnecting. They were becoming together. As the snow in Maple Ridge began to melt, revealing muddy roads and bare branches, the fragile beauty of Eliana and Noah's growing love found itself shadowed by something neither of them wanted to name. Reality. It began with a phone call. Eliana stood in the kitchen of her grandmother's cottage, her phone pressed to her ear, eyes blank as she listened to her New York editors speak words that once would have thrilled her. We'd love to bring you on full-time. Eliana, remote for now, but we'll need you back in the city by March. You'll be lead on a series we've been saving for someone with your eye. She hung up, heart pounding, not from excitement, but panic. Just weeks ago, this would have been her dream. But now she wasn't sure it was her anymore. She didn't tell Noah right away. She didn't want to see the light in his eyes dim. Meanwhile, Noah had begun restoring an old cabin on the edge of town, quietly, purposefully. He had imagined it for months, a home nestled among tall trees, with wide windows for light, a small studio off the back for his art. But now, for the first time, he wasn't just building it for himself. He was building it with her in mind. Every time he hammered a nail or sanded a beam, he pictured her laughter echoing through those walls. But he didn't know her past was calling again, and that she was already slipping away in her mind. Eliana sat with her grandmother that evening, the weight of her decision pulling at her chest like an anchor. I thought this was what I wanted, she said quietly. May looked at her gently. Sometimes what we wanted before isn't what we need now. But what if I disappoint everyone? What if I give this up and regret it? Then you learn, and you try again. But darling, if you walk away from love because of fear, that regret will last a lot longer. The next morning, Eliana found Noah on the cabin site. He was in a paint-stained hoodie, brushing snow off a wooden porch step. When he saw her, his face lit up. I was going to surprise you, he said, grinning. But maybe it's better if you see it now. He led her inside. The space was unfinished, but filled with light, raw wood, fresh paint, a small sketch of her sunflower drawing framed on a beam. I wanted you to feel at home, he said softly, and that's when she broke. Noah, she whispered, voice shaking. I got a job offer in New York. His smile faltered like a flame caught in wind. Oh, he said. Just that, they want me back by March. He nodded slowly, stepping back slightly, like her words had created distance even in the tight space. Is that what you want? He asked, voice barely steady. I don't know, she said truthfully. I thought it was. It used to be everything, and now I'm scared, she whispered, of leaving you, of staying and regretting it, of making the wrong choice. Noah looked away, jaw clenched. Do you know what it felt like waiting for you the first time? Not knowing if you'd ever look back. Her heart cracked. I didn't know it would hurt you so much. I told myself I'd never ask you to stay, he said. Because if you chose me, I wanted it to be your choice. Not a sacrifice. She stepped toward him. And if I don't know how to choose, then maybe I've been wrong, he said quietly. Maybe I waited for someone who was never coming back. Not really. Her eyes filled with tears. Please don't say that. I love you, Eliana, he said, raw and certain. But I can't be your pause button again. And with that, he turned and walked out the door, leaving her standing. In the dream he built for them, too afraid to step into it, for days, they didn't speak. Noah kept himself busy, pouring his ache into wood and canvas. Every brushstroke was a silent question. Every hammer strike, a heartbeat echoing in an empty room. Eliana wandered town like a ghost, unsure of what she was mourning, were her old dreams, or the future she was letting slip through her fingers. Her grandmother didn't say much, just left her tea and warm glances, as if trusting Eliana's heart to figure it out on its own. One night, Eliana found herself sitting by the frozen river, the same bench where she'd seen Noah all those years ago. She looked up at the stars, breath trembling. She whispered into the night, please, tell me I'm not making the same mistake twice. But the only answer was the soft rustling of wind through branches, and then a letter arrived. It was from Noah, not a text, not a message, a letter written in ink, folded neatly in a small envelope with her name in his handwriting. She opened it with trembling fingers. Eliana, I meant what I said. I love you. I've loved you in silence, in absence, and now finally with presence. But love can't survive only in memories or in dreams. It needs roots. I want to build a life with you. But I won't beg for that life to start. If you choose to leave, I'll survive. But if you stay, Eliana, if you stay, I will spend the rest of my life showing you that no part of you was ever too much or not enough. You don't have to be who you were, just be here. With me, always waiting, know as she read the letter twice, then 3 times, by the end. Her tears had soaked the bottom edge. She folded it gently, held it to her heart, and whispered, I can't lose him again. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to. The days that followed, Nora's decision to leave for Boston were filled with an unbearable silence between her and Elias. They stopped meeting, stopped texting, stopped smiling at each other across the coffee shop. It was as if the tender world they had built so carefully between them had crumbled beneath the weight of unspoken fears and choices too painful to undo. Nora tried to convince herself that it was the right decision. Boston was an incredible opportunity, and she needed to prove to herself she was strong enough to take it. But every time she looked out the window of her apartment and saw the now closed coffee shop across the street, her heart ached like it was waiting for something or someone it could no longer hold. Elias, on the other hand, buried himself in work, renovating the cafe's outdoor seating like it might keep his mind from spiraling into memories. He replayed their conversations in his head like songs stuck on repeat, questioning every word he said, every look he gave, wondering if he could have fought harder. But even now, when the lights were off and the cafe was empty, he still left. Her favorite cup on the counter, just in case. As if hope was something he could brew into the air. The night before Nora's departure, the town was unusually quiet, blanketed in a gentle drizzle. Nora walked alone through the streets she once thought she would never leave, her suitcase already packed and her heart heavy with unresolved emotions. She passed the bookstore where Elias had once surprised her with her favorite novel, The Park, bench where they'd sat in silence and just held hands, and finally, the cafe. The lights were off, but the little bell above the door still jingled when she pushed it open. The air inside was warm, familiar, filled with the scent of roasted beans and something like memories. Elias was behind the counter, wiping down the espresso machine. He froze when he saw her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet between them was thick with everything they hadn't said. I leave tomorrow, Nora finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know, Elias replied, his throat tight. You don't owe me anything, I get it. Nora stepped closer, her eyes shimmering with emotion. That's just it, Elias, I do. I owe you everything. I've been running my whole life, from places, from people, from myself. And you waited. You saw me before I saw myself. His gaze dropped to the counter. I waited because you were worth waiting for. I didn't want to hold you back. Tears welled up in Nora's eyes. You were never holding me back. You were holding me together. Elias looked up at her, his eyes filled with that same quiet steadiness she had always depended on. Then why are you leaving? Because I thought I had to prove I could stand on my own. But maybe strength isn't about standing alone. Maybe it's about choosing who stands beside you. Elias rounded the counter and walked toward her slowly, like he didn't dare hope just yet. Are you saying? I'm saying I don't want to go, Elias, not if it means losing us. Emotion cracked through his voice. Nora, I would have followed you. I would have supported you from across the country, across the world, if that's what you needed. But having you choose me, that means more than anything I could ever say. She stepped into his arms, finally allowing herself to collapse into the safety she had resisted for so long. The embrace was quiet, full of all the things that words couldn't carry. Her fingers curled into the back of his shirt as she whispered, You waited for me like no one else did. And I always will. He replied into her hair, his voice soft but sure. But I'm glad I don't have to anymore. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds parted just enough for the stars to peek through, And inside that little coffee shop on the corner, two hearts that had spent too long dancing around each other finally beat in sync. Their love wasn't loud or flashy, it was steady, true, and fiercely fought for. And now it was finally home. Months passed, but the memory of that rainy night in the coffee shop remained etched in both Nora and Ilias's hearts like a sacred turning point. Since that night, everything felt different, but not in a flashy, dramatic way. It was the small things that changed. The quiet joy of waking up next to each other, the way Elias would absent-mindedly reach for Nora's hand while pouring coffee, or how she'd bring him homemade lunches when he got too wrapped up in fixing shelves and repotting. Succulents around the cafe. They weren't rushing anymore. They were building. Nora decided not to take the Boston offer. It hadn't been an easy decision. There were days she'd sit at her desk, looking over her email drafts, wondering if she'd made a mistake. But then Elias would walk in, press a coffee mug into her hand, and say something so perfectly her something no one else would know to say, and she'd remember why she stayed. It wasn't about giving up ambition. It was about realigning it. She started a local workshop series for aspiring writers, filling a community space with young dreamers who had stories to tell and hearts willing to learn. It gave her purpose, one that felt rooted in both growth and love. Elias, in turn, reopened the cafe with a fresh new design and a deeper intention. The once small and quiet space transformed into a warm, bustling hub filled with bookshelves, local art, and cozy corners for people to linger and connect. He renamed it Still Waiting. It was Nora's idea, a wink to the love that had waited, grown, and bloomed inside those walls. It became a quiet success in town, not because of marketing or trends, but because it carried soul. Every day brought them closer, not without conflict, but with mutual care. They learned how to disagree, how to listen, how to say I'm sorry without pride and I forgive you without resentment. Nora would sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, Elias's arms around her, and wonder how she ever questioned the value of being loved like this so gently, so completely, so patiently. On the 1-year anniversary of their almost goodbye, Elias took her by the hand and led her out to the park bench, where they had once sat in silence during their first real moment of truth. The same bench where she had been too afraid to dream of forever, but this time, she didn't hesitate when he pulled a small box from his jacket pocket and opened it. There wasn't a speech, no dramatic fireworks, just the quiet glow of the setting, son, Elias's hand slightly trembling, and the question that needed no rehearsal. Nora, will you stay with me? Always? She looked into his eyes, those same eyes that had seen her darkest days and never turned away, and smiled through tears that spoke every word her lips couldn't. I've always been yours, she whispered, even before I knew it. They kissed beneath the whispering trees, surrounded by memories of what they had survived, what they had waited for. And as the sun dipped behind the hills and the sky turned a deep velvet blue, two hearts that had once wandered in loneliness finally found their home in each other. Love, they learned, doesn't always arrive with grand declarations. Sometimes it simply waits, quiet, unwavering, patient, until the day you're ready to see it for what it truly is.